everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Now I realize that I sort of went MIA after posting my 2023 knitting makes. I am finishing up my second master's degree in accounting. I have a week left and I'm super excited to be done. But this last semester I decided to take on an internship as well. And so I did spend my first, tax busy season as a public accountant. It was a lot of hours. I didn't have a whole lot of time to film during the sunlight, so I just sort of left my YouTube channel to the wayside while I was doing that internship. But of course, in the United States, tax season ends on April 15th, so I found myself with a lot more time lately. So I thought I would check back in and share with you all of the things I've been doing since I last showed up on YouTube and just sort of get reacquainted. I'm going to show you everything I've made, not necessarily in order, but just know that everything was made or finished sometime between the end of December 2023 and now when I'm filming. So first up, I have the Cup of Tea socks. This is a free pattern, and of course I'll link it down below. And I will try to at least just tell you what the yarn is. I probably won't link all the yarn just because it's a lot of yarn and could be very tedious. So my Cup of Tea socks is a free pattern. I chose it because it reminded me of sort of like that 1920s sort of Art Deco waves, and that made sense with this yarn, which is called Nymph is the colorway, and the yarn is Knitpicks Hawthorne, which is a superwash, slightly heavy fingering weight. That's what I'd say it is. But yeah, I really liked the sort of detail of those waves, and I thought it worked well enough with this sort of sock yarn. It is a hand-dyed yarn in that there's variance between each individual skein, but it's more like tonal, so it doesn't detract too much from that texture profile, so I think it worked out pretty well. So this has, your traditional heel flap and gusset construction, which is my favorite sort of sock. I think it fits the best on my foot, and it has a slip stitched heel. I think that's really all there is to say about this. I did 2x2 ribbing at the top. I think next time I would just do 1x1 because this does sort of bag out a little bit, but other than that, I'm pretty happy with how these turned out. Next, I'll go over what I'm wearing because that seems the easiest. So this is the fourth version that I've made of the no frills sweater from Petite Knit. So for this one, I'd say this is the one I'm happiest with in terms of fit. I've always made them a little bit more cropped, whereas this time I went to the full length that the pattern suggests to go to for my size. And I really, really like how it fits. I think it's the perfect sort of like slouchy. There's not a lot of details going on here. It's just a simple, basic raglan. And not really any shaping in the body. I do have some shaping in the arms or taper in the arms. But the yarn that I've used for this is Malabrigo's Arroyos, which is a DK weight 100% superwash merino wool. And I've held that with sort of a cheapo Amazon mohair that I purchased forever ago when I first started knitting a couple years ago. And the Amazon mohair is in the colorway Withered Green, and the Arroyos from Malabrigo is in the colorway Chircas, which has a really nice different greens in it. It has some like grassy greens, some deep darker greens, and some midtones as well, and I think it turned out really well. I didn't bother alternating skeins on this particular sweater because it was too hard when holding it with a mohair as well. Normally when I use Malabrigo, I do alternate skeins every single row, but it was just too hard when I'm holding it with something else. So I think I actually got away with it. The dye on them was pretty even, and I only had to use 3.5 skeins really, but 4. And so I was able to get them all in the same dye lot, and they were pretty similar to each other, so I'm very happy with how this one has turned out. This is the one I finished the most recently, and it's been getting a lot of wear since it's been done. So next up, I have another Shimo sweater. Let me go pop this on so I can show you what it looks like. So this is the second time I've made this pattern, and I did a lot of things different this time around. with hindsight in mind. So first thing, I didn't bother with the twisted ribs on the arm cuffs or the bottom of the sweater. I did twisted rib on the original one, and while it looks nice, it wasn't worth it to me. It takes so much longer to do twisted rib, and I just didn't think I got the value from it. I did use the twisted rib just along the neckline because that didn't take too long, and I knew that it moves sort of like seamlessly into the center front detail. So because this is close to my face, it's a little bit more worth it for the extra effort, and I knew that I needed that sort of like smooth transition to make it look good. Another thing that I've done with this pattern is I altered the distribution of the arm stitches and the body stitches. So I've done one size up from the previous one that I've done. So this one is done in a medium, and I think the first time around I did a small. I was happy with the way that the body fit in the small, but I felt like the arms were a little too tight. So for this one, I've actually kept the same body size as the small, but all the extra stitches that were given to me for a medium, I've put into the arms instead. And I think it fits a little bit better. I think that the raglan is sitting at a nicer position on my chest, where originally it was very far out, and I thought it made my chest look really like awkward and flat, which I didn't like. So that raglan has moved closer to the center, and I think it's a little bit more flattering. The other thing that I did different this time around is I cast some stitches on under the arm when I was breaking apart or splitting for sleeves. So for some reason, all top-down raglans that I've ever knit have stitches cast on under the sleeves, and this one did not. And I just thought it didn't fit quite right. I was getting some like bunching in the underarms. I'm still getting some bunching in the underarms, you can see here, but not nearly as much as I was before. So it's not perfect, but it's close enough for me. So this is the Shimo sweater pattern, and the reason that I chose this particular pattern for this yarn is Knitting for Olive in the colorway Pea Shoots, and it's the merino held with the soft silk mohair. And I thought that this little bobble design looked like a pea pod to me, so it just made sense to use with the Pea Shoots yarn. I finished this one just in time for St. Patrick's Day, so that was really my goal when I started it, is that I wanted to wear it for St. Patrick's Day, and I was able to achieve that, so pretty happy, and really like how this one has turned out. Obviously, that combination of merino and soft silk mohair is a classic one from Knitting for Olive. I have this combination of yarn in a couple of other colors. I have a little bit of trouble figuring out patterns to use with it, just because the gauge for me tends to be a little bit tighter than most of the things that are fingering held with a mohair. So I think my gauge, if I really push it, I can get this one, which was 22 stitches for 4 inches or 22 stitches per 10 centimeters, but it's kind of pushing it. It does make a quite loose fabric. So anything with a looser gauge than that, I just don't think works for this yarn. So kind of in a similar vein, this one is the Keep It Warm sweater, and I really love, I think my favorite part of this one is the sleeve detail. It has this sort of lace that starts all the way at the neckline and extends down the arm to the cuff, and is a really easy lace pattern to do, but I think it's really effective. This is one where I didn't even need to keep looking at a chart or anything like that. It is a 4-row repeat, but it's really easy to read your work, and so I didn't have to reference it very often, and I think it's really effective. So this one has a pretty nice central detail on here, a wide one that uses lace. It uses some cable work. This is the first time I've done this particular sort of motif. I've seen it in a lot of different patterns. This is the first time I've done it, and it's quite easy to do. Again, it's something that I didn't have to look at the charts too frequently, just because I could sort of like read my work and tell where I was going to next. So for the yarn for this is Drops Flora in the color, I believe it's Peachy, which is a discontinued color. You can't get it anymore. And then I've held this with Drops Kid Silk in the colorway Rust. So obviously The Peachy was a little bit lighter saturation than the rust, so you get more of that sort of like mottled effect on there, but I really like the color that it ended up with. I think it looks really pretty. I think the only changes that I made to the pattern, I think the pattern originally has a folded collar, and I didn't bother doing that because I thought it would be like too bulky with this sort of gauge of sweater. This pattern does give you sort of line by line instructions at the very beginning of how to do this. And I found those a little bit harder to follow or to keep up with. I do not do well with written instructions. I'm much better at a chart. And the reason that they were written instructions is because it was kind of funky on this raglan increase here until you got to the section where you have all of your stockinette panel at the side. So once you got to the section where you increased enough to get to the stockinette panel, then the rest of this is just charted from here down. But from like there up was a line by line directions written out, and I thought it was a little difficult to follow. So next up is a sweater. I'm sure you're probably all familiar with the pattern. It came out at the end of last year, and this is the Field sweater from Camille Vad. I had seen this on Instagram as she was doing pattern testing and designing it, and I just was so excited for it. When it finally came out, I bought it immediately. Of course, there was a lot of not so great feedback on the pattern. People felt it was difficult to follow or that there was a lot of mistakes. I will say that I made this at the same time as my mother. My mother is a different size than me. She's a larger size than me. The mistakes are for the larger sizes. So in my instance, I think I made a size 2 or 3. And I didn't have any mistakes on my version because the parts of the pattern that had the mistakes were for larger sizes. And it wasn't necessarily a mistake on my mom's, it just was written in a really confusing way, and it was difficult to follow. So if you're planning to make this pattern, I would say this is not a great first pattern to tackle, but if you're sort of like familiar with, you know, the Nordic way of writing patterns, I personally didn't think it was that bad. So most of this is done with cable work up here to make these beautiful grains that sit along the yoke. I decided to not use a cable needle. I did it all with my hands, and I thought that was a lot easier than using the cable needle. My mom did use the cable needle because she was doing hers held with mohair, and it just got a little bit splitty once you had multiple strands of yarn and you're trying to figure that out. But I used a single strand of Knitpicks wool. I used a single strand of Knitpicks Simply Wool Worsted in the color Wallace. I actually purchased this from somebody's D-stash, so I got a really good deal on it and I was super excited. I really quite like this Simply Wool Worsted or Simply Wool Aran. I've used it, I think I've made 2 sweaters with it this year. I'm working on a sweater that's using it, and I made one last year as well with this yarn. It's a eco yarn in that it's not dyed. These are the natural colors of the fibers themselves. It is a little itchy. It doesn't itch me, but I think that if you were sensitive to wool, it's probably not something that you would want to tackle, but it feels like it's really hard wearing. I think it looks really nice. I think the sort of subtle variance in the different strands and how it's plied together looks really nice, and I've been quite happy with it. So this is the Field sweater. I plan on making another one of these. I really love it, and I think it's a really flattering design. So next up, I have the Lakes sweater or Lakes pullover, and this is a pattern from Ozetta. So this one, again, I've used Simply Wool Worsted from Knitpicks, and I've chosen the colors. Winnie is the lighter color, and Whilimena, I believe, is the medium color brown. So you can see that these color brown, the Whilimena is sort of like a mid-tone to the dark, which is Wallace over here. So this pattern does not have stripes in it. This is something that I particularly wanted. Again, this is yarn that I purchased from someone's D-stash, so I didn't have a sweater quantity of either of the color, but I knew that if I combined both of the colors, I would have a sweater's quantity. And the reason I picked this pattern, I really thought it was an interesting shoulder construction. So this is a saddle shoulder construction. So you start out with these giant rectangles that you knit, and then you put the end of that on hold and you pick up along the sides to do the front and the back. And then when you get to the arm, when you go to add the sleeves on, you pick up all around the bottom, and then you have those stitches on hold that come off from the saddle shoulder, and that's what you use to construct the arm. So I thought the construction was really fun and interesting, and I have done a couple of saddle shoulder designs and I really like how they fit. I think I like them a little bit better than a drop shoulder, but it still has that same sort of like boxy feel. So for my version, I think I've done a 20 round repeat of the stripes and just done them all the way down, and really happy how this turned out. It's a little bit more casual than some of the sweaters, most of the sweaters I make, but I think it's really comfortable and I love it. So next up, I got into a little bit of a petite knitting phase again. So this is another pattern from Petite Knits, and this is the Eva cardigan. And I'm really happy with how this one turned out. I've used 2 yarns held together. I've used King Cole Merino DK in the colorway Teer, T-E-E-I-R, something like that. And I've held that with Drops Kid Silk in the colorway Marzipan. So the reason I cast this on my birthday weekend, and the reason why, is because I felt like the yarn sort of looked like funfetti cake, and that seemed appropriate for my birthday. And I'm really happy how it turned out. It's sort of like a light neutral, which I don't really have in my current sweater wardrobe, but it's elevated enough because of that mohair that I think it looks really nice and sophisticated, but the little pops of color are a lot of fun. Tony helped choose the buttons on this one, and we actually went with like a carved wooden button, which I think lends itself really well to this design. It is an oversized cardigan. It's supposed to be an oversized cardigan, and I really like how it fits. You have these nice wide 2x2 ribs both on the sleeve cuffs and the bottom of the cardigan, and then a 2x2 again around the neckline. The 2x2 actually turned out really well on the neckline. I think I might like it better than a double knit neckline on a cardigan. So I am planning to make another one of these again in just like a basic black, because I don't have any black sweaters, and I think that this would be easy enough to do in black that I don't get too frustrated with it. But yeah, really happy how this one turned out, and I've worn it a lot since it's been finished. The construction on this one was really interesting. I think she called it a European construction shoulder. So you start in the back and you do your trapezoid, and then you pick up and knit some along the front. But instead of continuing to knit like you would a drop shoulder design, you end up picking up along that side again, and it sort of makes like a set-in sleeve cap. And then once you've done that, you just continue on in a traditional sort of like raglan increase design. But it's a lot easier. It feels like you're making a raglan, but it has the sort of like look of a set-in sleeve, which I thought was really interesting and something I want to try again, because I think it looked really cool. It was interesting to do, and I think it fits really nicely on that shoulder where it comes to, my collarbone end and then just sort of drops. So the last sweater I finished during my hiatus is this zipper sweater from Petite Knit. So I had purchased some baby merino from Drops on accident on my very, very, very first yarn order when I started knitting. And I purchased like 16 balls of it. It was ridiculous. It was the wrong size. I meant to get the DK version, not the sport version. So it's just been languishing in my stash for forever. And Drops put up just sort of like a gauge swatch of them combining that particular yarn with the Drops brushed alpaca in the exact color that I had. And I thought the gauge looked so pretty, or the swatch looked so pretty, I decided that I would go ahead and do that, because I'm much more likely to use something in this sort of Aran weight gauge than I would as a sport weight yarn. So this is Drops Baby Merino in the colorway Beige, held with Drops Brushed Alpaca in the colorway Beige as well. And it ends up getting a gauge of about 15 stitches per 10 centimeters, which is exactly what I needed for the zipper sweater. I'm really happy how this turned out. Because I'm using those two sort of lighter yarns, It's a really lightweight sweater, even though it's quite fluffy. So I've heard a lot of people complain that the sweater can get kind of overwhelmingly hot, and that certainly is not the case with this one because it's such a lightweight yarn combination. I kind of want to give it a try again using a heavier yarn like a Nepal or some other sort of Aran weight yarn. I think that would be interesting to try if I wanted a more rugged, tough, warm sweater. I certainly have lots of opportunities to wear warm sweaters here in Colorado. So this one starts with a twisted rib neckline. You do this at twice the height and fold it down. I think the construction around the zipper is really interesting. You actually have a placket on the inside, so you don't have any of that zipper tape showing in the finished sweater. It's all like fully encased inside, which I thought looks really cool. I've put in a metal zipper. I would say the zipper is a little bit tricky to get in. I went slow, I did it by hand. I still have some areas where it doesn't look quite as clean as it could. I think that if I were to make this sweater again, I could definitely clean it up a little bit more. So it does have the twisted rib in the neck, twisted rib in the cuffs, and twisted rib in the bottom. I think if I make this again, I'm not gonna do twisted rib. I just don't think it's worth it. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I just wouldn't put the effort in again on the next time I'd make it. So those are all the things that I have completed so far, and I have 3 whips to show you that I'm currently working on. I used to be a very monogamous knitter, and that has changed recently. Now I tend to have 2 or 3 going at a time, so I don't know how I feel about that, if it's a good idea or not. So the first one, I'm gonna be honest, I haven't worked on this in months, but I really need to finish it. So this is a September sweater from Petite Knit, which is a brioche knit sweater. I've done the entire body. I've done probably about 80% of one of the sleeves. So I need to finish this sleeve, do the second sleeve, and the neckline, and then it's done. So it probably has a week's left of knitting on it, and I just ran out of love with it. So I haven't worked on it in a really long time, but I need to. I did do a lot of the sort of hacks from Lada on Instagram. So making this sort of increase and decrease design in the front, which I think sort of looks like angel wings. So I've done that, and I've also done that sort of special design on the sleeve as well. If you can see that, sort of like a rib moving in a different direction. So I don't know, I just need to finish it. I don't know why I can't get it finished. I just fell out of love. So the yarn that I'm using for this, the first one is Mayflower Kid Silk in the colorway Rust Brown. When I purchased this with a different pattern in mind, and when I got it, it was much too red for what I wanted to use it with. So maybe that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with this, because I'm not a red person, and this wasn't what I was expecting. So I didn't use it in the one I wanted to make it with. So it sat there for a while, and I decided to make this sweater. So this is that Mayflower Kid Silk, but I am holding it with drops Alpaca, and this is the colorway. I believe this is Rust as well. The color is 9025. It's a little bit much more of an orange color, and so the combination of the two, I actually quite like the color that this is turning out to be. I think this is one that I have a couple of sweaters in my wardrobe that it's this color, so I really do need to finish it. So that's the first whip. The next one I'm working on, which is a giant mess right now, is a Petite Knit pattern, and this is the Esther pullover. So it has this really nice sort of like diamond design. I believe this is a reimagining of an Issachar pattern from a while back, and the yarn design, or the Issachar, decided that they wanted to sort of like reinvent their patterns, and so they hired a bunch of designers to look at them again. I fell in love with the texture on this. I will say I have not enjoyed knitting it, which is why it's still a work in progress. I probably have 2 days left on the body, and then I still have the sleeves and the neckline to go. So this is knit, it's supposed to be sort of Aran weight. So I'm knitting it in the Simply Wool Aran weight, not the Simply Wool worsted. And this is the color Winkle. This is the color Winkle. So this was supposed to be sort of like their lightest color in the gray tones. So they have like a set of gray tones and a set of brown tones. When I got it, I was a little disappointed because to me it looks very beige. It looks very similar to Winnie, which is the light color in this sweater. So I didn't feel like it was as gray as it could be. And so I was a little disappointed with that because I wanted a pearl gray sweater. And then I'm holding this with Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the colorway Oat. So the two of those held together. The gauge is quite big, which you would think would make it go really fast, but with all of this texture in there, it just has not been going very fast. I am happy how it's looking. I will say that it's a drop shoulder design, so the top you have to knit flat, and then once you connect for the sleeves or at the bottom of the sleeves, then you knit in the round. My gauge changed a lot when I started knitting in the round, so the diamonds and stuff are a different size now than they were in the beginning of the garment, which is kind of a bummer. It might sort of block out, I don't really know. But yeah, there's this one. One thing I think is my favorite part of this, or of the design, is the pickup in the back, where you have this nice chained sort of like looking of the yarn along that shoulder seam. I'm hoping that when I block it out, it will look less sort of like bubbly and stuff like that. I'm hoping it'll look really flat, but I thought that looked really cool and I was excited about that. My last work in progress is a classic oak cardigan. So this is going to be a cabled cardigan. It's going to be seamed, so I'm working on the back panel right now. This is the first time I've ever done a seamed garment, and it's the first time I've ever done a fully cabled garment. I've done ones with like single cables running down the front or something like that, but this is the first time I've done something that's this complex. I am in love with how it's looking right now. I think it's gorgeous. This is a men's pattern, but I am deciding to knit it up in a medium, so I'm hoping it will fit me. Tony's already been eyeing it. I think he wants one as well. This definitely is up his alley in terms of the types of sweaters that he likes. So for this one, I am using Drops Daisy, which is 100% merino yarn, but it's not super wash. So I would say it's kind of similar to Sandus Garn's Double Sunday because it is a DK. So I'd say this is the cheap version of Sandus Garn Double Sunday, and I'm using it in the colorway Moss. So far, it's been working up really well. I do have some splitting as I'm making the cables, but not something that I would think is unreasonable or something like that. So here's the back. I just started sort of doing the armhole shaping right here. So I'm almost done with the back. I could probably have the back done in the next couple of days. But then of course I have to do the front panels, I have to do the sleeves, and then once all that's done, you seam it up, and it has a shawl color on it, which I also think looks really, really nice. So this is going to take me a little bit of time, but I am happy with how it's turning out, and I think that it'll be something I'm very proud to wear once it's finished. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this look at everything I've been knitting, everything I'm currently working on, and hopefully I won't take 4 months off next time, and I'll see everyone soon. Take care.